Thanks everybody for joining the webinar today. So really happy to be sharing this content with you. So for those that have jumped on already, yeah, thanks for getting on nice and early. A couple of things just to say up front with the webinar. We're definitely, so Tatiana is going to be helping to manage some of the questions if there's any questions throughout. So please feel free to add those in the Q&A section. If you look down the bottom and click on there, you'll be able to enter some content straight in the Q&A. There's also a chat section as well, so feel free to use that because part of the discussion, especially when we're talking about social engineering, it's a bit of a unique type element because it crosses over multiple different parts. So because we'll be talking about, in essence, how to bypass some of the security frameworks that are traditionally in place with a broad range of organisations. So feel free, especially for the range of people we have that are joining on through the webinar, which is across pretty diverse client base, plus some of our team suppliers, supporters, and people within the network as well. So yeah, hopefully you get some good takeaways about this, and I can give you some insight into a little bit more about social engineering. So to kick things off, the first thing I wanted to do was to share, I suppose, a little bit of background and to give you the definition of social engineering. We hear the word social engineering, and I suppose a couple of different things come to mind. We think about what occurs on social media point of view and some of the actions that are taken there. In essence, at its base level, social engineering is using deceptive and behavior and manipulation, a range of other combination of behaviors and actions with that human interaction to influence people to take some actions that may not necessarily be in their best interests. So multiple different forms are taken for that. That type of action and things that can occur, for example, can be such as getting access to a premises. So from trying to get access to an area and for really testing their security culture, and if they've got some good, robust security processes in place. Other elements can be about trying to gain information, to gain some IP, information about a competitive edge, a range of things. So the preface for this is to understand that realistically, in the security and risk space, we talk about protecting all assets, which is people, property, information, and reputation. And people and property we do quite well. We've evolved from the 1980s guns, guards, and gates methodology, and we've taken a more modern approach now with the things that we do. Reputation we spend a bit of time on as well, and especially what we look at with our digital footprint and a range of other things. Information is like a one definitely where there's some gaps, and we're going to talk about during this webinar the importance of protecting information and some of the methodologies that we use when involved in some of the social engineering activities. How do we influence? How do we get information access and influence people to take some of these actions, as I said, that may not be in their best interest to do so? So I wanted to cover off nice and early a couple of the points, I suppose, about the arsenal. So the arsenal, just some of the techniques and that's utilized from a social engineering perspective. There's a couple of different access vectors that occur when it comes to gaining access to premises. So I've already mentioned a couple of them about, obviously, there's the splitting between the from the IT point of view, and then that physical intrusion detection as well. So physically for getting into the premises. But I wanted to give you some information on a few of the more common ones. So a few of the more common ones that you can see here, for example, we've got pretexting, phishing, baiting, and tailgating are a couple of the common ones. I'll also intertwine some examples of where I've used these effectively in different circumstances as well when we get to a little bit further down the track. In essence, pretexting is about developing and having that believable scenario or story behind what you're trying to do. So some examples of pretext where I've used before for gaining access, because I've had, over my 28 years in the industry, a variety of organizations that approach and say, we believe we've got some solid security protocols and framework in place. The combination we have between our electronic security methodology and our physical security practices, we think we've got quite well. So can we sort of test and validate that? So I've been involved with doing this for media associations, for standard corporations, data centers as well, financial. So like a multitude of sectors have used social engineering to try and test the validity of their security framework. And so based on that pretext, depending on the individual client, can be something as simple as from somebody or from a supplier point of view. And we'll talk a little bit later on about how things like dumpster diving can be used for getting sensitive information and how you interweave that. But from pretexting point of view, it's not just about the fact that we get together and have a fantastic costume and set up with that. Sure, some elements of the uniform and attire work. For some of the people looking at the webinar now, I know that there'd be people that would definitely be across the fact that probably 10, 15 years ago, if you had a clipboard and a high-vis vest, you could pretty much get into anywhere. Well, there's a bit more work that goes into that, so there's a bit more involved with what we do. Sorry about that. The next one is phishing. So phishing is something that we would have all experienced at a different level. Apologies. Phishing we would have experienced like at a different level. Either we have received emails or messages or others that may appear to be something that they're not. And from the phishing point of view, something that occurs definitely within organizations. Communication can go through to HR departments, to finance. I'm sure we're all aware where it occurred with Service New South Wales, where some data was unfortunately leaked purely because of an initial phishing framework and setup. So from that point of view, it's very, very important to make sure that there's some initial training and that's given to your personnel to know what good looks like. And so from the phishing point of view, yeah, those messages like that come through, especially because unfortunately criminals don't take a holiday. And so during COVID, during some of these changeovers, what's occurred is they just become more advanced and they become flexible and adaptable with what we do. So there's been a dramatic increase with this, especially people now working at home and others, they mightn't have the same security framework. So you would have seen ones that came out, I think Netflix, Commonwealth Bank, a range of the banks and others, like the ATO sort of scam for things as well, have come out with these messages that look like legitimate links. It also occurs from organizational point of view that with larger organizations, what will happen is some communication will go. So if somebody has bad intent, they would communicate to the organization just to get a response so they can actually get a sample of what their sign-off is going to be, their email signature and others. And what happens is organizations sometimes aren't as secure and don't buy the surrounding domains. So for example, if my company is XYZ Mining and I've got the website xyzmining.com.au, then somebody with bad intent can go and buy xyzmining.org.biz or any other like your domains as well. If they then communicate with my organization and they get a response back, they get a view of the sort of formatting, what's in their email signatures, they've then got the opportunity to basically set up emails on that domain and to communicate to people that in all likelihood can be believed as being reasonable. And that's what occurs. So from the phishing point of view, it's really important just to make sure that the workforce, whether that's you're a security provider, like or from a client point of view, that your staff get some training as to what is good. Don't just click on links. Hover your mouse over the link and so you can actually check what the real link is behind it. Check the actual domain name, a couple of those sort of things. Baiting is the use, as it sounds, of dangling some bait. So multiple things. I've delivered discussions in front of rooms of security professionals where I've talked about baiting. And these are people that have been in the industry for a long time. And I say, can you please share with me what you have advised your kids if they see a USB stick in the gardens around school? Invariably, I don't get much response. And part of that being is it's not something that we discuss or we think to mention to the kids. But welcome to one of the, like a most modern and increasing use of baiting. So I think for a moment, for those that are on the webinar here for with children, if your kids see a bright colored USB stick that's in around the gardens in school or dropped around the footpath and it says Avengers movie on it or something like that, what do you think your kids are going to do? Do you think your kids are just going to think, oh, I'm not going to touch that, that's going to be potentially unsafe? Or do you think your kids are going to be running home and putting that straight into your home computer? So when they first do that, then obviously you got for viruses, keyloggers, and a range of other things, and then obviously information can be gleaned. The same thing happens within the working environment from the baiting point of view. So sometimes USB sticks that will say things on there, pay reviews, personal pictures, any of those sort of things, especially in the workplace, USB stick that says pay reviews and others, out of curiosity. So that's how this sort of baiting occurs. Tailgating is one that's very, very common. And the reason why tailgating is common is the fact that between with organizations, if they're going from like an access point of view, that for people, normal base level people within an organization, they don't have a challenging type approach. And so if there's a circumstance, especially with large businesses, that people are going through with their access card and going through, it takes a certain character or certain personal level of assertiveness for somebody to actually stop and say, I'm sorry, I didn't see you swipe. I don't know who you are. Can you go back out and swipe? So that's what occurs from a tailgating point of view. So a couple of these different ones here that we've just covered off now being, the pretexting, baiting, tailgating, these sort of things are things that I interweave regularly in a lot of the work that we do, especially when we're doing like if with the site visitation. They're very, 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 very common. So pretexting, and here's where I'll start giving you, I suppose, a little bit of insight as to some of the examples for where I've utilized social engineering as well. Pretexting, as I said, is about getting that believable type circumstance or situation. So the backstory as to why we're here. The information we gather from pretext can be done at different levels. With some organizations, and especially when I've done some work in and around the high profile individual, high net worth individual, and around some of the media sites for things as well, there's a bit of reconnaissance and open source intelligence gathering that occurs beforehand. The better the planning, the more structured you are, with this occurring, is when you're going to get the better result from a social engineering point of view. So if you're on the flip of that, if you're being the actual at your organization, then you should be looking at that and realizing that people then with bad intent would be looking at your social, your digital footprint, because that's where they're going to be getting information about your organization. So that's why we need to be mindful about that. So that can be something as simple as people within your organization that on their LinkedIn profile put, I'm a specialist in these systems, or these operating platforms as well. That gives some insight as to some of their skills. But to me, as a social engineer, that gives me some information to open up a conversation. So aside from those larger levels, I'll give you an example, nice and early now, about an example when I did some penetration testing and social engineering work around with a financial institution. I'm going to say one of the top 5 banks, so I'll leave it at that. And they have CBD location, which doesn't give anything away. So with this organization had said, look, we've updated our procedures. We feel pretty safe and secure. Can we get you to please test us at a couple of different levels? So I'll give you some insight as to some of the work that I did then, how we progressed that. First thing that I did, as far as it goes from a background checking point of view, I had simple as just I had my iPad and I had my mobile phone. I hit record on my mobile phone, and on my iPad, I typed in that bank name and I put in IT manager and just to see what came up. So 3 names came up. I randomly just picked one of the names, and this person, let's just say her name was Robin Smith. Robin Smith had worked at that particular bank for 4 years, and previous to that had worked at the Bank of Canada. So I looked at that, basically took me all of 10, 15 seconds. That was all the background checking that I did. I then went to the site and I spent 30 minutes at the site. 25 minutes of that was sitting from a distance and just seeing when people come to the site, how do they dress? Are they a suit and tie type crowd, or are they business pants and business shirt? Is there anything unique about the way that they attire? Because part of organizational culture is the way that people dress and blend in. So you'll see, are they an organization where people come in with messenger bags or briefcases? Are they brand name and blingy your type people, for things as well? So with this particular organization and with this area that they were in, people there weren't suit wearers, but they were very, very finished, with a bling point of view, and very overt about it. So I'm talking the big Mont Blanc pen, big cufflinks, all that sort of stuff, and the messenger type bags. The only other work I did in that first day was to walk past, and have a look through the premises, just as I was on my phone, and I saw that there was 2 guards in fixed positions. So that's all the prep work that I did on that day. So the next day, as part of with my pretext, I was coming in just to pretend to be a customer. So sort of come in, same thing, dressed as I would be in the CBD. Nothing about me that overtly stood out. I dressed similar to how I saw a lot of the staff there dressing in that as well. So, no tie, but business pants and shirt. I had Armani cufflinks on. I had a very blingy, high profile Mont Blanc pen, brand name sunglasses, all those sort of things. As soon as I walked in, the first thing I saw was there was another guard that I hadn't seen previously. So there was 2 fixed guards and one guard was on patrol. So I walked across and I stood next to the guard, like that was on the far side, that like in a fixed position, because the person that seemed to be closest to my age. So at that time, I went and actually stood right beside this person against the wall. I said, look, I just want to speak to you for a moment. If I stay here and out of your vision, your line of sight, is that okay for a minute? The person's going, yeah, no problems at all. The way I commenced the conversation was I said, look, I just want to say I'm really keen to be like you. I have so interested in the security industry. I've seen all the Jason Bourne movies. I know that you guys, like, you all get, martial arts training and these sort of things and the cybersecurity stuff that you do, but how can I start? How can I start being like you with what you do? The physical response from that gentleman as I started having that discussion with him was that he puffed his chest out, sort of turned, took a overt, so a hand down bladed type gesture, which we'll talk about gesturing a little later on, and said, it's not about how big you are and how you can fight, mate. It's how you handle yourself and communicate. Very, very domineering, like type body language, like in straight on for things as well. But based on that and the pride response for things, I knew straight away that I was going to get some leverage with this person. So I continued down that path. Aside from discussing about the fact that, I'd love to get some more insight about his training and, what got him into this life calling that he's doing now, I asked him a couple of other questions and some operational based ones for things as well, such as, gee, you must get sore feet because you're here on those concrete floors, from 8:30 in the morning to what, 4 o'clock do you stay here? Geez, how do you deal with that? Is it hard? To which he replied, no, we change every 90 minutes. I go to this point here. He goes down to the desk area. Eddie goes down to the loading dock. I said, oh, the loading dock, is that where you guys do all the money delivery and things? He said, oh, we get just the lunchtime delivery, but it's not as glorious as it seems, mate. So we're speaking for another couple of minutes and I started intertwining some different bits of conversation, things such as, oh, you got some great cameras here. Surely you guys get up and have a look at some of the gorgeous looking women in here as well. And he said, oh, no, John does the lunchtime cover. So from 12 to 1, but no, other than that. So during that time, just from having that discussion, because I'd worked and identified about that pride and ego type trigger for things as well, this person started sharing information. And that's another insight that I need to give you. People like to be liked. We're social motivated creatures. And the thing is, what people don't realize is sharing some information or secret with somebody that you think likes you, you get the same sort of reward as you do. So sharing secrets, you get the same sort of reward, being like your mentally, the dopamine reward and other parts as well, as it do with somebody basically showing and validating that they like you. It's the same sort of reward. So once you do that, and that makes you feel good sharing something lucky because, hey, this person's, a good trustworthy person. I'm sharing a bit of a secret for things as well. You get a bit of a reward. And that's the thing that happens as well, is that once you've built that initial level of trust and rapport, once you get that, so you've removed any of the initial questions that people ask when, that people think when they meet people for the first time. Once we've overcome that barrier, quite a large amount of information and subsequent access can be given as well. So I'm going to loop back to that story a little bit later during the webinar, but in essence, the pretext was limited to just that very limited part, this was with day one, as mentioned on LinkedIn, and just checking from an entire point of view. But from having the discussion there, I was there for a total of 19 minutes. And during that time, I mapped out the entire resources, what time there was changeover, where the vulnerable times would be for things as well. And actually left with the person there shaking my hand saying, look, here's my number. If I can help you in the industry in any way, please let me know. So you heard me talk a little bit about body language and clustering for things in that as well. And that's another part to understand early, and I suppose where some of the behavioral psychology comes into this. When I'm looking at interacting with people, and this is from sales marketing, from security operations, social engineering, I look at everything that somebody brings with them to the conversation. How are they attired? What are they wearing? Are they wearing jewelry, makeup like other parts? How are they standing? How are they gesturing when they're dealing with other people? So if I've got, for example, if this guard that I was dealing with was standing very straight body language, his gesturing to people was very straight and so palm down, direct body language for things as well. If I wanted to get information and build rapport with him, if I came in with straight, authoritative shoulders back, and that's as well, then that person subconsciously can take that on either challenging his alpha male status or authority. So if I'm trying to make sure that I get some information and to build that rapport, I start off by changing the way that I interact, engage. I'll slightly blade my body. I'll hunch my shoulders a bit. I'll do what they call body softening gestures, where rather than being straight, I'll tilt my head. I run my hand down my chin or down my ear for things as well. Things that look innocent enough, I start straightening my shirt and others, but these are body language softeners. That coupled with the right verbiage gives this person a level of comfort. Then when I'm having the discussion with them as well, if they have any mannerisms that they do, so one hand in pocket or other part, like or other things as well, I'll start mirroring that and using some of their own body language like elements back to them as well, how they gesture, how they stand, what they do to reiterate words. I do that because during and at the end of that conversation, this person subconsciously says, I'm not threatened. And actually, I like that guy. Don't know why, but I like that person. What they don't understand is what they like is because they're seeing part of themselves in me, because I'm mirroring their body language and some of the things we do from a gesturing point of view. So I think it's important for the pretext to understand that it's not just about the information and data and other parts as well. It's getting the right total story and then making sure that the behavior when on site mimics that. So for you that are on here from the security space, not from the client space and other parts as well, understand these are the things that to actually be wary and mindful of. How do we train our people like about the fact that we want to be have good engaging customer service? But if people ask these type of questions, here's some of the reasons why for things as well. So it's something that we definitely need to be mindful of. So we've got a side there, just the 7 signs that you're being phished. So part of these is, I suppose, to challenge some of the thinking for what you may think. When we see some of the emails come through and these fake emails, that we look straight away and we go, this is obviously a fake email. We know it's a fake email because there's 2 or 3 spelling mistakes and really overt spelling mistakes. So what we actually jump to is that like you'd be thinking then, oh, so these people, it's obviously they've just got someone doing this to hack because like, there's really obvious, like your ones in there. Those are deliberate actions in a lot of cases. The reason with these phishing emails and other parts like that they have spelling mistakes is because the people that click on the link anyway are the ones that naturally would continue through with tier 2 or tier 3 when it comes to like with these phishing emails and scams. So that's the part, because if it's got the right logo, the click here link and some element of validity, that these people aren't detailed like a line by line readers, they're the people that would traditionally keep clicking. So that's why some of these things that occur that have the spelling mistakes and others, that's why they do that, because it's their own natural filtering system that they're trying to use to get down to who they should be doing second and third tier communications with as well. So dumpster diving is probably one of the least talked about things that occurs when it comes to social engineering and from that security vulnerability point of view. When we talk traditional security, it's very easy to talk to the physical elements and that crime prevention through environment design and the combination of lighting, perimeter security, and that layered type approach. A lot of organizations as well and bolster their security based on where they think their vulnerabilities are. So they'll do, okay, people are coming through the front door of our premises. So we need better lighting, perimeter patrol, access control, some visibility over this supported by guarding and whatever use of technology, that combination of things. Some elements of that occur, but there's also some weaknesses that occur in loading docks for things as well. But think a minute for the rubbish. Think for the dumpster type areas. How many organizations that actually have security frameworks in place, but when it comes to what they have around with their rubbish bins, they don't. Now think from my point of view. I want to try and turn, if I'm trying to get some information or influence within an organization, I want to do that using and gaining as much information as I can so this call feels trustworthy, honest, and relatable. So from my perspective, there's been circumstances where from going through bins and things that have been thrown out, I've seen internet service provider bills. So the conversation that I may be making for finding out exactly who a decision maker can be, or if there's issues, maybe saying that I'm calling from IINet or Telstra or Big Pond or whoever else, based on what's the bill. I've now got an account number, a detail, and something about your average spend. So this one organised to come and have a chat with somebody because I notice your internet expenditure that's normally $280 a month has really spiked over the last 60 days. So who could I best speak to about that to help save you guys some money? Those sort of things. There's been multiple circumstances where medical records and other things have been obtained, information, content from dumpster diving. So I mentioned that from 2 parts. One, again, from the client perspective, so people are on here within our client network, understanding the importance and the protection of information as well, right through including to obviously like the final document destruction and others. And from the security point of view, making sure that we include, firstly, from an advice point of view and some operational element and like tightening your protocols around things like for the dumpsters and because so there's some very sensitive information that can occur in there. So getting a little bit onto, I suppose, now the crux of the base content, like for with this. Amateurs hack system, professionals hack people. I'm a very, very firm believer in that. So the difference between hacking systems is that there's certain key elements that are in place. And, I've had some talks recently, I've been on a couple of panels about smart buildings and building automation and about how, as humans, we want more easier access, easier information, a range of other things. But at the same time, the more we're doing that and broadening like the device access and others, we're providing information leaks and vulnerabilities for things as well. But when it comes to hacking people, I say in a security framework, it's a combination of hardware, software, and wetware. Hardware is our physical security that we have in place. So building gates, framework, fencing, other parts of things as well. That's a hardware. Software, we've got our processes, our framework, procedural elements, whether it's, how do we actually vet, manage access control, all those other things. And then the wet, which is the people. You can have hardware and your software in place. So you can have the shiniest, glossiest operating procedure and framework manual. You can have a great combination of electronic security services that's intertwined that are great data feeds. But at the end of the day, if it's not solidified by your people having an awareness as to what is acceptable, like what is safe and secure behavior and not, then that's when it can translate through to vulnerabilities. So some of the things as well, I suppose we're using the behavioral element because people, especially customer service people, do not want to be confrontational. So to give you an example of other parts, how I've been able to gain access to premises. If there's somebody that like I'm saying I'm having a meeting with, if I get like a general in a large organization, a general manager and operations manager, I will put their name in my phone. And in that phone as well, I'll either have somebody else, friend, colleague, anybody else saying, you need to send me from your phone because I've changed their name. So let's just say that a general manager of a business is Tom Smith. And so I change my contact's name in my phone to Tom Smith and say at 11 minutes past 10, I need you to send me a text saying, where are you? You're the only one running late. I now come into your office and I like you to go through the front premises, and I'm coming in at 9 or 10 minutes past the hour at 10 o'clock, carrying 3 coffees. Why am I doing that? A couple of reasons. Because people are naturally non-confrontational people, if I come into the majority of establishments 10 or 11 minutes past the hour saying I'm running late for this meeting, like with Tom, it's 11 minutes, it's okay, I know where I'm going. I'm dressed well and I'm carrying 3 coffees. And then while I'm there, my phone buzzes and it's a message from Tom saying, where are you? Hurry up. How many people do you reasonably think would be stopping me from at reception? I can tell you it's a very small percentage. And so that's why, because of the fact there's a saying in essence, my heart, through your brain, the things that I'm displaying, my emotions for the heart as well. If I do that well when I'm coming into a premises, then people naturally translate and take part of that on board. I physically see it. If I'm wanting to gain access, I do this with the whole coming around the corner with 3 coffees, stressed look on my face. And the person that, if there's 2 or 3 people at reception, the person that naturally gets up there, oh, what's wrong? Distressed look, that's the person I go to. And that's why I meant about sometimes that line between customer service and engaging can translate to vulnerabilities if people don't get the right training. That's why it's so important to get the right training as well. So this one's one of my favorite photos, aside from some fantastic beard work being shown here, is the importance about the need to blend in. So if a pretending site is to make sure that how I fit in for with the premises. So there's a couple of questions that people ask if they see somebody for the first time. If somebody walks into your workspace, regardless, and you don't know who they are, there's a couple of things of questions that mentally they want to know. And so I need to make sure that my behavior, my conduct, the way I dress, attire, engage, interact with you, answers a couple of those questions before you even ask them. So some of the things, am I safe? Are you a friend? Those sort of things. Who are you? They're all things that people want to know. If the way that I communicate with background, the way I'm attired, another part, answers some of those questions already, really all that's left is, what do you want from, what do you want from me, and how long this is going to take? And so that's why it's important of getting this, this part. The other thing is, people don't like to be first. They like to act based on what they see other people doing for things as well. So that's why when I'm communicating, when I'm coming in, I'll make sure I'll drop lines off their website or social media. I'll make sure I said, I've already covered off from the attired, your point of view. Why do we think if you go to a pub or club, which I know we're not at the moment, bartenders and barmaids put a bit of money already in the jar? It's because people don't want to be first. But that level of social acceptance, another part, is another sign. It's another behavior. It's something else that we use for that rapport and trust building, which is a really important part. When I talk about this in social engineering, people naturally gravitate to what they think people with bad intent and how that's going to be used. Some of the best natural social engineers you will ever deal with in your life are your children. And I'll give you some really close examples, some examples of that, because it highlights a couple of the base principles. Let's just say a daughter has come in and is speaking to the mum and saying, look, I really want to get this toy. I've been really good. I really want to get the toy. The mum says, look, I'm okay with it, but you go ask your dad. So the dad's sitting on the lounge watching TV, and the daughter comes in, sits next to the dad, puts her arm on his shoulder or head on his shoulder and these sort of things. And, Dad, I really want to get this. I've spoken to mum, and mum says it's okay. Some natural things there. That one line, and like anything that occurs, let's break that down for a sec. Proximity, so use of distance for a feeling of comfort as well, is one of the behaviors things used. Also the use of touch, like with the hand on the shoulders. Social acceptance. Mum has already said, for things as well. So in other words, I don't want to be the bad guy. It's exactly the same how these sort of elements are used within that working environment. So I suppose I'm trying to give you some real base behavior, like indication for with those as to how this can be used, from the intent point of view. So when a person dresses, walks and talks the way we think, questions get answered that haven't even been asked yet. And so that's the point from a pretext point of view. But it also means, as I said, from the security point of view, some of the things that we should be looking for then is, just because somebody comes into our area of where we've got that security sphere of influence or control, is making sure that we have the right framework and procedures in place. Making sure, based on your organization, is the fact that, are you an organization that makes sure that there is no unescorted visitors? How do we manage access, like your cards and visitor cards? A lot of places I go to, people have got really good initial procedures for about tracking for, here's how we issue a visitor's card, and we've got a really solid process. But ask them what process they have about reconciling at the end of the day for who's handed those visitor cards back, who should they be tracking? Because if there's an evacuation, how do they know how many people are there, let alone from the security point of view? So it's having tight protocols around that, and that's uniformly for everybody. I'll put this image because it's just another example. Realistically, with the right preparation, you can blend into any area. So I have had examples where I've been delivering services, a couple of extreme examples. I had to do some services and some security support services where somebody who was a high-profile businessman had a real threat against their safety, and a validated threat. So as a result of that, I needed to be staying within a couple of meters of that person. But because that person was also going to a large awards night, that person was not allowed to know that they had security. So the board had signed off on it. Their other family members are aware of it, but for that particular person. So I had to go to a function within that person's industry. I had to go to 2 social functions and stay within a response area. That was all about blending in, about the attire, about having some element and phrasing and verbiage around that if somebody's within that space, that they would feel comfortable speaking and dealing with me. So it's the same from that social engineering point of view. So don't just think about, just for the baseline, this is another person just coming in, or a standard person. We need to be process driven with what we do. And regardless about that fact, if somebody's coming in to try and pass their anxiety and stress onto us, we always want to be engaging and customer service focused, but not at the cost of our security and the security integrity of our organization. So that's a really important part. Just a reminder, guys, as well. I know that Tatiana's going through with the Q&A. So if there's any other questions, please feel free to put them in, and I'll definitely answer those at the end of this, as many as we can get to. Impersonation is another one. Just I suppose an awareness about with the attire, and especially in this space, carries a lot of weight, because seeing somebody in uniform and attired well, it carries some level of trust and comfort. Used to be, as I said, just the high-vis vest and the clipboard is what would be utilized. That's evolved now. So now, obviously, things such as police, investigators, security, sheriff, any position of trust it could be used from an impersonation point of view. Anybody who realistically, because of their attire, would be reasonable for them to be believed that they would be in this area, can be utilized. So technicians, air conditioning, rubbish removal, other parts for things as well. So the process that I say in response to that is that this is another vulnerability across multiple organizations, especially when it comes to suppliers and other parts and people being coming on site, is make sure that the rigid processes are in place and that they're followed. As I said, just because somebody is attired, for example, somebody attired in a police uniform or other parts as well, still be validating who they are for their identification, badge number, and details. I also suggest to organizations that have a decent amount of foot traffic and regular suppliers, just because you know the same face for your air conditioning guy or your Sparky, randomly be stopping and checking them as well. As that, okay, yep, as part of our new protocols, can I get some other ID and proof for things as well of that you're here for this purpose? Sends a really strong message, not just to the people that are dealing with your organization, the suppliers, but to the people around, and seeing that engagement and interaction. We take our security seriously. That's regardless for any organization, because every organization is part of a security supply chain. So from that perspective, as I said, that impersonation point of view is something that are used, but also we need to understand that that's something that people with bad intent utilize as well when they're coming through and looking to try and gain access, because automatically it brings with it that base level of trust. So I'll cover the word baseline there and just touching on that, I suppose, at the moment. The baseline, and for what I do, aside from now, from a social engineering point of view, aside from getting some background and feedback on the information on the site, some of the things I initially do, and you can see some different steps there: information gathering, threat modeling, the analysis, the exploitation we do, and then the reporting. Some of the more basic ones, and for some of the people that are on the webinar now with this, occurs in a variety of premises. I have had times where I make sure if I'm going to be going to a site for some penetration testing, I'll go there at 10:30, 12 o'clock, or sometime between 2:30 and 3 o'clock. I'll always park in my car, walk around, and I'll do an external lap of the premises. I know that about 10:30 at lunchtime and between the 2:30 to 3 o'clock mark is when people are going to come out for a snack or for a smoke break. So if I'm doing an external walk around your premises and I see cigarette butts or a brick near the door or whatever else, I'm just going to hang around and wait at 10:30, 12 o'clock, or 3 o'clock. Because here's what you need to understand. I only need to build rapport and conversation with the first person that comes out that door. Because after that, everybody else has seen me talking with this person. So when it's time to go back in, if that person I build rapport with isn't the person that's got that challenging culture, then everybody's going to logically believe it's fine for me to walk back in that door. A really, really basic but clear one for you to understand the importance about access control, process, and how these things occur from a vulnerability point of view. So that's the stages, but I said the things I look at is how do people dress and attire? Is the person I'm dealing with pride or ego motivated? Do they interact and change their gesturing and body language different when they're dealing with a male or a female, or between subordinates and superiors? These sort of things I get and watch very, very quickly, just from an interaction point of view. The thing is, what I'm looking for when I come in for this social engineering point of view is, how do I get you to feel comfortable and to like me? So part of that is I'm going to mimic part of your body language and words, another part. And then based on your personality, I'm either going to be more submissive, comical, or other parts, or if I need to be more dominant, and assertive in others, based on your personality style, that I know you're not going to challenge that, then that's the path I'll take. So these sort of things happen very, very quickly. The thing is to understand, if we like somebody, so based on this rapport building and others, if we like somebody and get on well with somebody, then we look for opportunities to say yes. It's the same for marketing and business development as it is from a security point of view. So both sides with that, we need to be mindful, don't give trust easy, and stick to process is a really, really important one. So I put just some of these samples up here about some of the non-verbals things at the moment now. But in essence, the thing with non-verbals is, does he like me or not? How can I tell from these things at the moment now? And some of the ones that are quite generic ones that I put in. So don't place a lot of weight with those. There's a lot more work and a lot more exciting stuff we can talk about and study with these sort of things. But the things like the mimicking body language, like your gesturing and these sort of things as well, all those sort of things occur. It's also important when you're looking at this and with the non-verbals to understand that look at things in clusters, not an individual. Just because somebody's folding their arms doesn't mean that they're closed off and doesn't want to give any information. They may be just cold. But look at different sort of things. So here's one, like in the next time you're in a group conversation, which based on current lockdown, who knows when. If you're seeing three or four people have a discussion, when there's the one person who's talking, and it's especially in conversation, the person who's doing the majority of the talking, look at the way that they're standing and look at the blading with their foot. The majority of people won't stand straight on, but they will turn and blade one of their feet. And so the person who they're blading that foot towards is the person there is most interested in engaging or with this element with the conversation. If that's supported by their actually turning of body as well, which sometimes can be at the detriment of others, that reiterates that. So it's these samples of body language clustering. They're the things that I look for in interactions when I know how to identify who the decision maker is and for how I need to communicate when I'm dealing with this person as well. So here's another example on slide with this. Consistent eye contact, breaking eye contact. These are all the things that you hear. Oh, hang on, if somebody looks away and down to the right, they're being suspicious for things as well. I don't place a lot of confidence in the individual elements, but I look at the combination of items here. Things called kinesics, for example, blushes, shrugs, eye movement, these sort of things. Things that can sometimes be micro expressions that reinforce something that they're saying or doing. Those are more natural things that carry more weight, like you're with me. What they're doing with the hands, if they're saying something, do they naturally say, oh yeah, you're right with that? And is there a natural non-verbal, like a thumb up, like these sort of things? Illustrators and how they use their gesturing. These are things that happen that unless somebody, I suppose, is really aware of their interaction and aware of things like kinesics and illustrators and how they do it, they don't use things well. It's hard to fake those unless you know about it. And so, for example, the little subconscious, like, oh, you're right, with a little thumbs up and these sort of things to reiterate points, it's things that we do naturally. I use those things and sometimes manipulate some of those little micro expressions and other things as part of gaining trust and rapport, for things as well. So yeah, it's just important to understand that it's a combination, the physical actions, what we're saying as well. The saying is, mouth speaks to the ears, well, hands speak to the eyes. And so you're gesturing in other parts as well. So that's probably a really important single line takeaway to take out of this is the fact, as I said, your mouth speaks to the ears, but your hands speak to the eyes. And so the communication point of view with what I do in trying to, the manipulative type behavior in other parts, I use that, but it's the same thing when we're doing things for building trust as well. Why do you think there's so many pictures and frames about whether politicians with these hands are out and open hand and those sort of things? That's because open hands and put forward says trust and honesty. At the actual primal level, it actually comes from showing, in essence, I've got no weapon of offense and defense about myself. So in other words, I'm not a threat to you. But we link that now between honesty and integrity. That's why we do that. And that's why illustrators and manipulators, when it comes to the engagement point of view, can be so important and they carry so much weight. So as I said, I work out on the different type of approach based on the person's makeup and how they engage, but also how they engage with others. Am I best to come in with that boss-like authority or more submissive type approach? And when I say gestures, it's not just about an approach. It's not just that straight body language, direct eye contact and chin straight on things as well. Do I go from being this coupled with the straight direct gesturing? If it's that person who believes or acts like that authoritative person, then that's what I'll do. I'll hunch, I'll turn my body a bit more side on. I'll do those body softening ones, and my gestures will be palm up gestures for things as well, because this is not threatening. It's the combination of all those little 1%ers that at the end of the conversation, this person says, I don't feel threatened, and I like yeah, this person's all right. There's something about them that I like. That's what I do. So that's why it's really important for tying those things in. As I mentioned earlier on, people like people that like them for multiple reasons. If somebody likes you, similar to what happens with chocolate, it releases oxytocin within your brain. So it's the same sort of thing. The exact same chemical reaction happens in your brain if you trust somebody and share a secret. So think right now, for the people that are on the webinar, when there's somebody that you know that like is a close friend, and you think, oh, this person's actions, what they've done, really shows this person likes me. That warm, tingly reward feeling that you get, starting from the oxytocin from your brain, that's exactly the same response that if you trust somebody, how you get when you share a secret. So that's why, from the social engineering point of view, and on the flip side, from the security point of view, the protection of information is absolutely so important. Because once we actually have that initial start, that initial kickoff, that people are feeling comfortable and they get that feeling of, oh, this person's good and I've shared this secret, it's a reward feeling. You want to do that. And so my actions are going to keep going. That can be as simple as when you give me some information that I'm quiet and just nodding my head. Because after a little while, that's going to be uncomfortable. So a large portion of people are going to keep talking. So just how do I manage not just the words, how do I manage the pauses in my speech as well? And with the interaction, it is really, really important. We make decisions and actions sometimes based on the gut feeling we get with somebody, but that gut feeling is based on elements of snapshot perception on how the person is attired, how they engage, how they make me naturally feel. And that's what I'm trying to, I suppose, give some more depth on from a social engineering point of view, that sometimes the way that this person's making you feel is because of a structured or fabricated type framework, because of how they've attired, interacted, what words they're using, or all those sort of things. My emotions, your brain. I couldn't explain it any clearer, any more simple than that. So I put this in because I think it's important just to have a couple of examples of, I suppose, from the physical intrusion detection as well. These are actual examples of things that have been out. Couple of reasons, things behind that, and it's probably worthwhile covering this off for different people based on the different makeup of people on the webinar. So to give you some examples, top left up there, the principle aside that we've had the cameras and then something's been built, is that what occurs quite often from a physical security point of view is we actually get some initial items in place, but then we make adjustments to the built environment or the operational flow of what's occurring in our premises, and we don't make that, we don't adjust accordingly with the security framework. That can be access control, camera, lighting, a range of other things. And so it's important to future-proof as part of where our plannings are for things as well. Because also, aside from any other parts that I look at from the behavior in others, I also look at vulnerabilities from the physical security point of view. Underneath that, you can see obviously the part there with the framework for the entry gate, and then you've got the code in there where it's got the actual code down. And just in case you didn't get it the first time, you've got it on the second sticker. That occurs more regularly than what you would realize. Or what happens is things are so well worn that it's on the actual key or a range of other parts. So that protection of information, we put security elements in place, but then what can happen is if it's not underpinned by an awareness of the operational outputs and the values of the organization, then people within your own team can start trying to short circuit security protocols to make things easier. IT security protocols go in place, and then staff will say, this doesn't work for me now. I'm just going to copy this to my USB stick and do it at home because it's faster because of all these new processes, those sort of things. The other part, you've got the McDonald's picture there, which I suppose comes down to just the multi-use with devices and well-placed devices and items. Yeah, definitely from a planning point of view and having the right framework in place, they can control expenditure, not just about the initial framework and setup, but ongoing maintenance as well. So examples, for example, where people put in a 5 or 8 megapixel camera compared to doing 3 or 4, lower resolution items as well. And the last one, like the doorway. So the first thing, if I'm covering this off in a face-to-face part, I say to people, so what do you think about that? Is that a good or bad solution? And the natural response is, that's shocking, because it's obviously all we're doing is giving people a ladder. I put that in for 2 reasons. One, because of the fact that, yep, 100%, that is the first thing that it looks at. And if anybody's watching Ninja Warrior or any other parts, a lot of things to look at is I look at things from a parkour point of view, what access and things are we given. But I want you to think again now about crime prevention through environment design. Part of that is territoriality and natural surveillance. So what do we have in place that shows the borderline for with our property or our premises? But how do we then make sure what we have in place doesn't detract from natural surveillance? If that was a complete solid gate, then anybody walking past that, if somebody had jumped over and was trying to get access, it also becomes a hiding spot. So this is obviously like a part where they put this barrier in, but then you've still got visibility through. That's the difference why some organizations put hedges rather than higher fences, because it shows the borderline of the actual property or the site where that's getting looked after or protected, but it doesn't provide something for somebody to hide behind. Next time you're looking at a picture of the White House, have a look at what they've got around the outside and why you got the visibility, because it's black loop pool fence type fencing to show the perimeter and border, but not detract in any way from visibility of people going across. So a couple of those concepts are things that tied in with the other approach elements on attire and others as well, are really important. So this video now, and this will be maybe the only one that if we have any technical issue, here is where it's going to be.
About cybersecurity today and how safe people's passwords are. What is one of your online passwords currently?
It is my dog's name and the year I graduated from high school.
What kind of dog do you have?
I have a Chihuahua Papillon.
And what's his name?
Jameson.
Jameson. And where did you go to school?
I went to school back in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
What school?
Hempfield Area Senior High School.
Oh, when did you graduate?
In 2009.
Oh, great.
It's like my cat's name and then just like a random number.
Okay. And you had this cat for a while?
Yeah, she's my childhood pet.
Aw. And what's her name?
Her name is Jolie.
Jolie. So like a password of yours would be Jolie and then a number.
Yeah.
Like number 1?
Like my birthday.
Oh, when is your birthday?
June 12th.
Oh, nice. And what year were you born?
95.
Oh, great. So Jolie, 6/12/95.
Yes.
Got it.
So you mean to give my password right now? No, I cannot do that.
But we all want to know what it is so we can tell you if it's strong or not.
Oh my goodness. Let me think. Okay, one is Tel Aviv. Yeah. 468. And then Israel. It's only 3, but it's for me it's strong enough.
Ireland, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Gemma.
1, 2, 3. Spelled Gemma.
Well, most of them are Italian.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Like
So
what? Like what's a good Italian password?
my grandma's name.
What's your grandma's name?
Maria.
Maria. So Maria is your password?
Oh yeah, now you know my password.
Think about cyber.
So you can see from those that basically the points that you saw and how things were acted there and communicated, you may think, oh yeah, that really doesn't happen. I did exactly the same thing at a Chamber of Commerce meeting when I was doing a presentation on social engineering and other parts of the Chamber of Commerce meeting. And during the discussions, I gave some things such as some of the communication points I'd shared with them were, a lot of people, which they still do, sadly have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 or other parts like as part of their password, but there's a bit of a trend now where people are trying to improve their passwords. So, but they'll use a combination of their pets' names or child names and then 4 digits. Can I ask which one of you use your children's names or pets' names? Couple of things out of that. One, if people also feel comfortable sometimes proving you wrong. So their response could be something as, no, I use my husband's name, or I'll use my first car, or for whatever else. So a similar type of thing. The second point then is because, especially if it's come with confidence and trust. So the second part to that was if they say, oh, pet's name, and I say, okay, well, it's the majority. So over 85% of people that use their pet's name then have a 4-digit number, which is normally day and month of their birthday or month and year. So which one of those is it? 0406 for 4th of June or 0680 if June 80? Which one do you use? So through the combination with those, and in 15 minutes of conversation, I then spent 10 minutes just on checking a couple of the social media profiles for the people that had attended this session, and then came back and individually said, you should probably change some of your passwords and gave them their passwords. So from that perspective, the protection of information, as I said, is really, really important. It's something that we need to get right. So tying this all together, and I'm mindful of the time for things as well, is that a couple of things will occur from a social engineering point of view, and I suppose I want to think from the reverse as well, from that security point of view, is that people, if they're going through and if they have bad intent for gaining access or information about your IP, information to damage your organization and other parts, they're going to research the site, the person, and other key stakeholders. So that's why having an awareness of the digital footprint of your organization and the main stakeholders within it, when you're within it, is really important. It also means looking at what people, when we say about what people bring with them to the conversation, we should be training our frontline staff, like, whether it be concierge, security, or other parts as well, on just because somebody's feeling that they're dressed the right way and how they're communicating, don't break from protocol from other parts as well, whether that's stress, anxiety, or other parts, or anything what people try and share or overburden their emotions and other parts to try and break protocol. Is we have protocols in place for a reason. We need to make sure we're sticking through for those. The system is the solution, and not taking the shortcuts like you're for with that. Those combination of things that I said for with those 3 coffees and that now. So the second stage to that, like it was, I came back on this on the second day after having all this information. There was a staff access at the back of that premises, and I said the person's name, Robin Smith. So that's exactly what I did. I came at 11 minutes past 10, said that I had for a meeting with Robin. I was all set up to when I walk around, and there was a guard behind this entrance whose sole job was to stop unauthorized access, because this was to the executive levels with this finance institution. So I got there at exactly 11 minutes past your 10 o'clock. I had my coffees ready, and as I walked around the corner, I put the stress look on my face. Everything, all the subconscious parts, like the tightening of the eyes for things as well, clenching with the mouth, all the parts that I know even subconsciously would say, I have some level of stress and anxiety. As I approached the doorway, the first thing that the guard did was swipe me through and open straight up. I walked straight past the guard and then got to the lift, pushed the button for the lift. The only problem being with what they had in place was it was swipe card access to get to the higher levels. So during that time then, whilst other people may give up, I actually pretended that I had an ID card in my back pocket, and I was trying to back up and sort of lift my butt up against to try and get there. So this guard actually left his station, came over and said, which floor? So I said floor 3, and I was up there. So post that time then, by the time I got up, I walked through 2 different sections on that floor. And then what happened was, because I was not far off 10:30, which is the vulnerable time, as I've said, earlier on, somebody opened and came out of the door, and I just basically, you followed straight in through that premises. So now I'm in on that premises, in a financial institution where they've got, and for those that don't know, with the banks, to try and save some of their footprint with what they're doing at the moment now, they have open areas where they basically will rotate staff through. You don't have your own set desk and set floor. When you sign on, it says today you're on desk 7 on floor 4. They do that to avoid robbery, theft of assets, for things as well, and it means they can adjust desks and others based on workflows. So I sat there, then I was on site, where in essence I played Angry Birds and for a while, and filming just for showing access. I got on site, I was on 3 floors and was there for just over 2 hours. And I actually even helped them because they were doing an emergency evac training session, and I helped them evacuate the 3rd floor during that time. All because of the fact that from coming in, my attire, the communication, how I managed the interaction, did nothing that would detract from them feeling comfortable and trust with me being there. And this is one of the main, like I said, one of the main financial institutions. So it's important, as I said, to understand that, yes, there is some people that I suppose that have bad intent, that spend time researching your organizational digital footprint and adjusting how they engage and interact based on what they think is going to give them access information or other parts. And we need to make sure that the right security framework, the training, induction, the awareness is commensurate with the risk landscape that that's in place. That's the only way that we're going to help obviously make sure that we tighten up against these. So the final thing from me, I suppose, on this is, regardless of with what's coming in or with what you're trying to do, as long as you've got a good backstory and things are well prepped, there's a chance that that these vulnerabilities can occur. So I've tried to finish it pretty right on time. So I've only got sort of the one question that's come through. How do we achieve balance between vigilance and also that customer service? So great question. Thanks for sharing that, Anto. The initial thing about that is first making sure that we have from an organizational point of view, have the right framing in place and training for with our people based on what I'm going to say is our risk landscape. The risk landscape that we have in place, in essence, is that we need to know that we're going to have people coming through, suppliers, and with some organizations, a large amount of people coming through. So there's a certain element of risk that comes with that. It's the same when I speak to retailers and they say, I don't want any theft. I don't want anyone stealing anything. So I'll say, no problems at all. Let's put up a 20-foot fence. We're going to electrify it, put a moat and snipers on each corner. And they say, but then we're not going to sell any items. Yeah, agreed, but at least you're not going to have anything stolen. It's the same thing with any business or organization. We need to make sure that the framing and the responses we put in place doesn't detract from the customer experience, another part, but is still aligned with our, as what we call ALARP, so as low as reasonably practicable on the risk landscape. So what level of risk we're prepared to accept. So as part of that, there is going to be some times from that customer service point of view that if people are, it takes me 2 minutes to get in and sign in, like with your site. Due to our security protocol, so we take our security very seriously, like for ourselves, but also for our suppliers and our customers as well, is we need to have some of the reasoning and training around that. So once we find and identify for where that line is, that this is an acceptable level of security for our premises with that combination of process, electronic security, and all the other elements, is that we're rigid with that. We need to make sure we've got that in place. We can add the right messaging around it and the right training around it. But in essence, part of it is just finding the right communication method and selling the benefits of doing that, because it's at each level. It's about from the electronic security level. Organizations sometimes say, why are you, it's hard to get set up an account like with you guys are doing these things. And it's because realistically, we take our security seriously at every level, not just about the site access and other parts as well, information access and others. This is all for the for the right reason. So I hope you've got some good takeaways out of that. Obviously, the key thing that I wanted to really cover off there is the fact that regardless of that, the physical and procedural element, like for with security, is it really needs to be tied together with the human factor. That behavioral psychology and tied to the next step being then what's discussed about the psychology of risk needs to be part of what we do and who we are with these organizations. We need to understand also that not everybody's moral compass is aligned with ours. And so we need to make sure that the framework we have in place, the processes we have in place for things as well, are aligned with that. We need to make sure that we give the right training and information to the people, within your, the workforce, or as I say, the security supply chain. It's not just about your direct team members. If you've got suppliers and others as well, like we're coming through, how do we give the information, the education and awareness to those people as well? So everybody's aware as what good looks like and what safe and secure looks like. So thanks for clicking on with the webinar. I know that they're going to do a sort of edit version with that and sort of make that available for sharing, but I hope you've got some good takeaways out of this. Please let us know some feedback. So if you want to send an email through to myself or to Tatiana just with any feedback, like that would be great, because we want to make sure these education sessions are of benefit to you and aligned with some information that you're after. So thanks very much, everybody.